to you, Ma'am Ilinita Corteza. Today, I am going to discuss Module 8 and 9, which is Communicating in a Multicultural Society and World. First, I am going to define culture, melting pot philosophy, cultural pluralism, co-cultures, marginalized group, assimilation, accommodation, separation, ethnocentrism, globalization, multiculturalist, diversity, culturally confused, cultural imperialism, intercultural communication, interracial communication, interethnic communication, international communication, and intracultural communication. Culture. It is the system of knowledge, values, beliefs, customs, behaviors, and artifacts that are acquired, shared, and used by its members during their daily lives. Melting pot philosophy. It is the view that different cultures should be assimilated into the dominant culture. Cultural pluralism. Adherence to the principle of cultural relativism. Co-cultures, composed of members of the same general cultures who differ in some ethnic or sociological way from the parent culture. Marginalized group, those excluded from mainstream social, economic, educational, and or cultural life. Assimilation, the means by which co-culture members attempt to fit in with members of the dominant culture. Accommodation, the means by which co-culture members maintain their cultural identity while striving to establish relationship with members of the dominant cultures. Separation, co-culture members used to resist interactions with members of the dominant culture. Ethnocentrism, the tendency to see one's own culture as superior to all other culture. Globalization, transmission of meanings, ideas, values around the world in a way that extend and intensify social relation. Multiculturalist, the persons respectful of and engage with other people distinctly having different cultures. Diversity, the recognition and valuing of differences encompassing such factors as age, gender identity, ability, ethnicity, sexual orientation, income, and etc. Culturally confused, lack of understanding of cultural differences. Cultural imperialism, the expansion of dominion of one culture over another culture. Intercultural communication, interaction with individuals from different cultures. Interracial communication, interpreting, sharing of meanings with individuals from different races. Interethnic communication, interaction with individuals from different ethnic groups. International communication, communication between persons representing different nations. And intracultural communication, interaction with members of the same racial or ethnic groups or other co-cultures groups. There are 4 variables used to distinguish cultures, and these are individualism and collectivism, high and low context communication cultures, high and low power distance cultures, and lastly, feminine and masculine cultures. Individualism cultivates initiative and achievement, in which the emphasis is placed in developing the sense of self, whereas individual goals are stressed. Collectivism tend to nurture group influences. Individual is expected to fit within the group, whereas group goals are stressed. This variable reveals on how people define themselves in their relationships with others. High context communication culture is a tradition bound communication system which depends on indirectness of communication. The cultural tradition shape the behaviors and lifestyle of a group, which is an implicit information. Low context communication culture, a system that encourages directness of communication, tend to gather background information when meeting someone for the first time, which is also an explicit information. This variable describes the entire countries or a particular people. Ends of continuum on how the message is exchanged in a culture and how important the context is in communication. High power distance culture is a culture based on power differences in which subordinates differ to superiors, or superiors and subordinates view each other differently. Low power distance culture is a culture believe that power should be used only when it is having a legitimate power and they are apt to employ experts. This variable extent that people within the society accept that power distributed unequally and power distributed in a very specific focus. Masculine cultures value aggressiveness, strength, and material symbols of success. Socialize members to be dominant and competitive. Feminine cultures that value tenderness and relationships in both members of success and the high quality of life. Compromises and negotiate to resolve conflicts, seeking win-to-win solutions. This variable describe the socio-cultural categories and socio-cultural processes that shape the behavior in part by observations about what women and men can do. Problems happen due to culturally confused in which lead to conflict between each other. It includes the inability or unwillingness to accept and understand the differences of each other cultures. If this thing continue, it suffers and have the tendency to be the source of quarrel. This confusion may be one of the explaining factor, which is a culture wars, resulted from a growing lack of consensus about what is the appropriate or proper in a given circumstances. Conclude that more or less anything given in the service of people, it needed to have a people or individual preferences. Thank you. That's all for Module 8 and 9.